And I say all this because it's like I'm not running for mayor of the universe, but to how blunt it is, I went home, immediately started shooting up, and like on the fourth bag, I went out. My knees, I almost overdosed. My knees buckled. My chin hit the sink. Boom. And I thought, like, man, first I thought, I'm glad my girlfriend's not home. You know what I mean? Because God, I might be helped. And then I thought, man, your number just came up.
Welcome to the podcast,
Thank you.
Dan.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
This is Dan. Welcome to Tales from the Grips podcast. It is a pleasure having you on.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the excitement and the enthusiasm with like, come on.
No, totally. Yeah, well, this helps.
Yeah.
I drink enough coffee just to be on this side of speaking in tongues. So, but yeah, like I told you last night, I texted you. It's like I went for a walk, meditated, got my dad from dialysis, coffee. Good to go.
Yeah. I've spoke at a lot of conventions, and obviously I haven't done one of these before. If you spoke in any like big meetings before, anything like that?
I did on the pandemic, I did one, like some regional convention, which was interesting because I was like super depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went on there and I was like, I'm super depressed. And I did a local one many years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I haven't really been in that arena too much.
Yeah, I had found that no matter what the speaking engagement is, I'm equally as nervous.
Absolutely.
No matter what. So is it like the same for doing a podcast?
It is. Yeah. I mean, like this, I had my sponsor of 14 years is Tom C. I'm just naming him. He's passed away, but he would always say like this is the spiritual realm, the anxiety, of that. He always had it. And actually, I went to this the retreat online during the pandemic, and he led this meditation, and it was a big meeting. It was and people were like, dudes were like, man, I've never been so calm. And after the thing was over, man, he called me, and he had like 49 years, and he was like, how was I? That's encouraging.
Come on, dude.
I think it's because we care. I did once. I went to a rehab and shared, and I was like Miles Davis. I went in there all cool. I had like 2 years, and I probably like put my feet on the table. You know what I mean? And it was a disaster.
Really?
Yeah, I wasn't humble. I went in there. I was like, you know what I mean? Like teaching. So it's good. Yeah. This is like, I think for many, this is like my passion and purpose. You know what I mean? Like recovery. Like I can say like in my recovery, but I know, and I'm not just blow smoke, but I know you're involved and you're, this is your life. Like I know people, you participate and you're into it. So it's like passion and purpose with the lowercase P, but it's like we're in recovery. It's not just like in my recovery. I don't clock out when this show is over. Like I'm good.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I have really been on that kick this year, like purpose and it being not because I'm doing this. This is obviously it's a combination because I love recovery. I love all that stuff. So I get to do this, but I've been really on that kick lately about like being in recovery, providing that like empty void, that passion aspect of like purpose and meaning in life. What better place to it definitely fills that void of like of not having meaning or something, different level than like being a parent and stuff like
drifting.
that.
I read this thing when I originally got clean, and that's good because I'm going to say, of course, I don't represent any, or like I was initiated into this like ceremonial magical order in Ireland who I wouldn't name. So I'm just saying, I'm here as it's my story. Like I'm a bad representative for Dan B. So it's like, but I'm glad because I feel like I can speak freely about spirituality. Like my story is like drugs and God. And I get into that. I mean, I went from being like a nihilist looking up at atheism, and then I kind of had the awakening and I was like, something's going on. But I read this book, this woman, Evelyn Underhill, who was like a British, kind of a Christian mystic in the 20th century. And this book it's called Mysticism. It's just people trying to, have union with God or a higher power. And there was a line, it says, it's interesting. It's an anonymous ancient Roman saying. And it was like, the fates lead the willing and drag the unwilling. So it's like, I think it's true. Like the purpose we talk about and being of service, I think it just happens. You know what I mean? In the process.
Yeah.
It's like trusting the process, trusting life. So anyway, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go us.
Yeah.
Up,
Good job for messing your life up and then helping other people that mess their life up.
Well, that's the thing. People will be like, I get it. Like, I don't like align publicly with any group. But I think like as far as people who knew me, like say if I got caught at a support group meeting and it's like, oh, you're here. It's like I was a junkie drunk. I mean, I wasn't like Keith Richards, but I'm like, if what the world has on me now is like, oh, you quit drinking and doing drugs and you're trying to help society, like guilty as charged. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like getting off the bed of nails.
Yeah. It's been a hell of a ride. Not to mention it's like kind of like the 12th step.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah.
If you're going in the realm of steps,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
what's your clean date?
My clean date is, I got to think about it because of I'll get into this in the story. I get confused because I got clean both times Labor Day weekend. I've been taught like any day ending in Y is a great day to stop, But it was, so my first clean date was September 6, 2007. Because we came in around this, I remember like when we were in the same time. And then I went back out. I had 8 years. I went back for 11 months. Now my clean date is September 3rd, 2016.
September 3rd.
So it just kind of happened both times. It was like Labor Day weekend. I don't know if it was like a matter of like not having any money or my body being broken. But I think I'm someone, I never thought I'd get clean. I never had, addicts, either their mind, like our egos are either like Led Zeppelin or like Hanson. It's like the two extreme, either I'm a rock star or I'm whatever, nothing against Hanson. But I never thought I'd get clean. I never thought I'd relapse. You know what I mean? Like I thought I was so entrenched. So I look at, my first meeting was September 5th, 2007. That's when my recovery started. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Because I knew it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me I started using when I was a child, like many, and I got clean the first time I was 35. So it took me 20 years just to show up. And I went out for 11 months. So that's a pretty good batting average, man. You know what I mean? Like I knew it worked. Now saying all that, I wouldn't recommend relapse to my worst enemy. You know what I mean? So, but so September 3rd, 2016.
Yeah, they talk about like being, with a body full of dope and
absolutely.
A head full of recovery, how miserable it is. But I have to also think about this. When you were talking, it made me think about it. Like there is, at least when I first came in the rooms, I had no faith that this would really work.
It's incomprehensible.
That
it's going to work.
Yeah, so I really, really hoped it would. What I mean? It was like the last house on the block, but I really didn't have a lot of faith in it. So at least, I guess, if you come back from a relapse, you're like, I know this will fucking work. I just got.
Yeah, and it was painful, man. I tell you, as far as like, I'll talk about meditation way too much. You have to be like, beep, like, but I meditated every day through the relapse. And it was, I'd get up, like, I had a job, I had a great girlfriend, all this stuff. And I would get up and I would sit. And my mantra was like, use. I would go use, like go in my bathroom, use and go to work. But so I had that connection to a higher power. But when I was out, people were like texting me. I mean, I vanished, dude. I was in the middle of this tribe without being a jerk about it. But people were like, they knew what was up. They're texting me like, what are you up to? And what could I say? Like, if I'm lucky, 20 bags a day. So I had people still trying to find me. They would let me know, like, it was weird because some people that I didn't like had the audacity to like reach out to me. Like, and I'll tell you this too. I came back and I remember there were these people I'd never met, and this was humbling, and it was good. It was an awakening, and they would say stuff like, come to meetings and blah, blah. And I wanted to say like, don't you know who? Do you know what I mean? Who I am?
Yeah.
and I've, Brian, I've never seen those people since, and that's not to say they're not still clean. Just because I haven't seen them doesn't mean. But in hindsight, I'm just like, those were like angels in human form saying just like, be humble. Because I realized like, let them participate in this experience. Let them help me. Like I'm back. I'm dope. I'm dope sick. I'm kicking again in the meetings. So that was one to grow on. So my relapse, I had to find the education, and mine was anger. Like one of my little canned things I'll say when people make the mistake of asking me to share is like, it's true though. Like when I came in, I had 3 main triggers, moonlight, sunlight, and oxygen. I wanted to use all the time. Like you were saying, it just seems impossible that's going to go away. And after the relapse, I realized my main trigger is anger, because I can get myself, I just turned 51. I feel like I'm going on 12 sometimes. Sometimes. It'd be a lie to say that I'm always this childish-minded person. But I know that from my own experience, I can get myself so angry. Raging out. And I think, well, what'll calm me down? Using. You know what I mean? So I'm like, if you go back out and you make it back, find the education in it. Because otherwise, it was just folly.
Do you mean education as far as, because I tell people, it was like, I was super uneducated. Like when it comes to understanding who I am, how I think, like being able to place labels on it, like I'm angry or I'm sad now, or this is surrender or this is happiness, or, and you got all these principles and defects. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, I knew, I say this like 2 things. I remember when my then girlfriend, when I came back, she said, like, it's just matter of factly. She said, like when you were so spun, you thought you were in control of your job, in control of addiction, and control of bipolar disorder. And I was like, she's right. She's never gotten high in her life. I forgot I was powerless over these things in my life. So, as far as the education is like, don't go back into those dark woods. Like I had to draw a bigger line in the sand, basically, and not go over. So it's another unsolicited character building exercise. You know what I mean? But it's, people say like using is not an option. Using is always an option. I know, and I'm not saying that like to challenge my own recovery or anyone else's, but I remember like the first time I got clean, I met this guy at a meeting, and he robbed a bank. I'm like, so bank robbery is an option. Murder. So using is always an option. It's just a bad option.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So knowing that, and it's all good. And my stories change. Like people will say like, oh, they went out because they wanted to get high. Dude, I had 8 years. I had done all this work. Things happened, which we'll get into. But things occurred, and I went back out. So but ultimately I came back. So I now have experience to help people coming back. That's part of it's expanded my life. And again, I would not suggest this extracurricular activity to get there. So I remember years ago, someone said like, I don't know who teaches me more, like those who stay or those who go. It's true. If I'm really humble and know who I am and stay open, I'm learning from all of them. You know, because when people come back, I'll say with, not with a mallet. I'm like, what happened? Because I need to know, and I feel like they need to let us know how we can reinforce our own heart and scene or whatever. So yeah.
How long did that relapse last? I was trying to do the quick
11
math.
months.
11 months.
And I'll say this: I went out.
So you went out a month after your clean date.
Dude, I was so spun. I had 8 years. I didn't even go to a meeting. I was like, I don't care. I had given away. I had this whole collection of self-help recovery. I gave all the books away. Take this to. I was already gone. And the day I chose to go back out, I don't know what happened. It's like the weather in my head shifted. But I called this dude, and he's like, I'm not going to make you dirty. And of course, I was like, I'm already used. I just lied. I'm already using. And Brian, people say like, I've never heard the voice of God or higher. It was like a chorus in my head. Call somebody. Blah, blah, blah. I knew I had a phone full of people who weren't going to get me high. And I didn't. And I went and I remember I went to the dude's house, and I'm right back in the movie. There's like a dog and some dude waiting. I'm back in the movie. Like within an hour, I'm back in the worst movie of all time. And I snorted a bag of heroin, and it was just, I remember driving back, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to shoot it. And I drove, and I immediately went to my folks and stole like insulin syringes. And I say all this because it's like, I'm not running for mayor of the universe, but to how blunt it is, I went home, immediately started shooting up, and like on the 4th bag, I went out. My knees, I almost overdosed. My knees buckled. My chin hit the sink. Boom. And I thought, like, man, first I thought, I'm glad my girlfriend's not home. You know what I mean? Because God, I might be helped. And then I thought, man, your number just came up. You know what I mean? Because I thought I was like the gingerbread man my whole before. I thought, well, I'll never die, and blah, 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 blah. And the madness is that I remember I went outside. We had a 2-story apartment. I went outside. I walked. And it's funny how quickly you get religious. I'm like, God, help me, God. I've walked it off. I'm sure people in our audience have walked one off. Yeah. I was smoking a cigarette. And I was like, God, don't let me die. Don't let me die. Cold water on me. And then within an hour, I'm using again. So 11 months. It was, but man, I came back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah. Right. But it was an adult dose because when I first got clean, I was like 35, and I think I was 43 or 44. I was like, but addiction doesn't care if you're an AARP or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's indifferent to your health and whatever. You know? It's not ageist.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, let's take it back a little bit.
Look way back.
Man.
Go to the womb.
Yeah.
Born high. Sure. I'm an open book, man.
Yeah. Well, it is one thing I found, not for everybody, but a lot of people, they come from a substance abusing family, an addictive nature family. Yeah. Is that part of your story?
I'll say, I mean, I always try to I don't try to disqualify myself, but I was raised in love, and my parents didn't use at all. And if I get too far back on the mic, let me know. I'll get too
No, you're good. All right. You're good. Don't worry.
But in my family, like when I first got in recovery, it was important to me, and through the process to know, like, why I was like, why am I here? You know what I mean? Like, I knew it was drug, but what happened? But in my overall family, I mean, my family, I think I told you before, I'm from Kentucky. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. And, but grew up in Jacksonville. I'm really Jacksonville Beach, full-on beach kid. Yeah. Moved there in 80. I grew up, surfed once, by the way. But, but in my family stories, it's like both of my great-grandparents were bootleggers. My mom's grandfather in Eastern Kentucky, and my dad's grandfather in Louisville, Kentucky. And so that's the stories. And, I just hearing these stories of people. I remember when I was like maybe 14, I had some second cousin in Louisville who literally like drank himself to death. He was like 35. They found he was like laying at the table and he died. So my parents did not use, but I really think I'm just a born dope fiend. I think I have the whatever the genetic marker. I mean, like many, like when I was really little, like some of my innocence was like taken, like sexual abuse. And, but I walked most of it to the pawn shop.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think I am genetically wired to change my mood.
Yeah. So your parents didn't really have any substance abuse issues.
No.
Like you said, they were bootleggers. Like
my great grandfathers were bootleggers. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's interesting.
Yeah, and I know people in my family who drink, but it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I do think genetically, it's like, imagine like a river of like blood and bourbon. And there's just a fist fight occurring in the river. That's the genes running through me.
Yeah.
Like wild hillbilly stuff.
Yeah. You mentioned, if you don't mind,
bring it all.
The sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. What age did that occur?
Oh, like 4, and it was another boy, and it's weird. It took me, and it wasn't like one of those things I got clean. I was like, not to minimize it. It only happened a couple times, but that was enough. Because it took me years, like before I relapsed, I was in therapy, which I highly suggest if people can, it's all gains. But the therapist, she's like, "Oh, you were it's sexual abuse," because it was the thing of I was like taken away to the back and and it was a secret was tacit. And then growing up, and I was just like, it's so funny because when I was a teenager, I was always into art. Like I was the kid who drew. That's what I did. I was an annoying kid. I knew all the answers in school, and I drew really well. But all my heroes, when I was like 13, 14, I got into these writers like Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs, what they call the beatnik, like 50s writers, post-World War II American writers. Half of them are homosexual or lesbian. They're all drug addicts. So when I was a teenager, I was like, what if I'm gay? I mean, really had this fear, but I was like, and then I was diagnosed bipolar when I was 13. And I think gender was probably better because of like gay rights, LGBTQ rights. And but I'd hear about all these kids that were killing themselves, that they were like they were gay, and I thought, is this where I'm going? And it's I'll acknowledge, like, I am a neurotic person. I don't, I mean, I am. I know I'm kind of nuts. Yeah. Like in the past week, I was like, I'm dying of liver failure. This is clean as a whistle, and I'm gonna go to hell. Like, going to hell is an old chestnut. Yeah. So I say all this like I wasn't gay. I was waiting for this, and it's almost embarrassing to say, like, I would have been relieved. Because I was always like, what is wrong with me? And maybe that was it, right? If I was gay, I was like, this is why I feel like such an outcast all the time. But what that did too, like, I grew up like in the 80s punk rock community. I had tons of friends back then who were like, I'm gay, lesbian. And having people in my life who were like LGBTQ. So yeah, but saying all that, we talk about apart from, like, I definitely, addiction for me, as taught to me, was about separation. And recovery is about connection. And I think feeling at home in my body, like not feeling homesick at home. You know what I mean? Like like all is well, but like, why do I feel like my shadow just grew? So, but I think sexual abuse definitely made me feel, how could it not make me not trust people? And you know what I mean? But it's all good. I can't really say it was, I don't think I'm in denial. I don't think it was that much of the damage. The damage came later when I went like manic depressive, Yeah. But it's key. I think it's key that people talk about this stuff. Like I'll say now, like, I'm 51 and I'm way over the small talk. You know what I'm saying? Like when we started talking right away, it wasn't like, so like I'm way over. I can chit chat and be like, hello, Your Highness.
Yeah.
But it's important that I think people feel okay to talk about this stuff. About who they really are and what happened. Mm-hmm. Like, nobody signs up for the damage. It's like, what do we do with the damage? We heal. We're lucky. So, you know what I mean?
And the only way to heal is maybe be open and honest.
Totally, man. Get
it.
real. Yeah. Like gut level.
Yeah. I definitely, I think that having a traumatic childhood as well, I had found that it gave me the ability to compartmentalize a lot of things in my life, because I was able to kind of, for me personally, like the stuff that happened to me, I was able to like just, it never happened.
Right. You shut it down. I'll tell you it's amazing I'm not a serial killer. When I was in my early teens, I had grown women. I was like sexualized by women. Mm-hmm. It's amazing I'm not like, a cannibal. And of course, back then it's like there's the differential. You're a boy. It's like, oh yeah, man, you got laid. But it's like, that was like, I was literally groomed by a woman. It's like, it's pedophilia. Mm-hmm. She was a grown ass woman. I'm a kid, so. But I've resolved that stuff as much as I can. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I can, if I talk to people, particularly, I think men can have more. It's demasculating to talk about it. They feel like it is. But of course, I've had guys I've talked to. It's like, oh yeah, me too. And it's just like, it all kind of blows away.
It goes back to that purpose aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like at some point, the damage becomes how we heal and how we help others. It's like we can't have the principle without the defect. Mm. You know what I mean? I have to work on something. Like, it's weird. Like I look at recovery as like, I like the maxim, what is it? I'll forget it. It's like, give up, clean up, make up, and keep up. Mm. So the cleaning up part, you know what I mean? Of getting real. So, but yeah, I was raised in love. It took me a while. When I got in the rooms, my mom died 2017, and they were married for 51 years. So totally stable environment. My parents busted their ass, man. They both crawled out of incredible poverty. I mean, I'll tell you how. This is my celebrity name drop. My mom, Loretta Lynn, the country singer. My mom was Loretta Lynn's second cousin. That's how poor.
Dude, we might be related. You know her name? Last name?
It was Webb.
You know my last name?
Webb. I know.
We are related.
That's interesting.
Or we could be related.
Intrigue. So yeah, but if you ever seen the film Coal Miner's Daughter with Sissy Spacek, if you start that film and you stop it before anything good happens, when just like it's like babies and coal mines, that's how my mom grew up. So I feel like my parents raised me with the principles. Like they never said like, this is spiritual. Like we didn't go to church. I probably went to church 3 times when I was a kid. So I was raised in love. But as far as the using, I remember like the first time I used
Well, I wanted to go back.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to like beat it down and keep bringing it up, but when you were talking about the sexual molestation, did you ever tell anybody when you was a kid?
I didn't. I know when I was a teenager, I had a friend. She was a girl who was a friend, I loved her so much. I never told her like I love you, but she was my friend, and we would like get high together, and we'd go see like Sonic Youth. We'd go to shows, and we talked about it. I think in her family there had been either her or a sibling, and I talked about it. But yeah, I always knew it was there, but I never. It's weird, like with secrets. Like one thing I identify with is like everybody has secrets, but it's never like good.
Yeah.
Like the secrets I had when I was a kid, it wasn't like, now look, we won the lottery. Don't tell anybody. It would be like, no thought of their own, but my dad would say, my dad had these cousins, these names like Spaceman and like Bags, like this criminal, good guy. But he'd be like, well, your cousin so-and-so is back in prison. Don't tell anybody. I'm like, I'm 10. Who am I going to go to school? Like a book. My cousin is a criminal. So I never did really talk about it. And when I first got in the process and writing about my life, it was there. It wasn't like, I know for some people the stuff comes up, but I was fully aware when it was happening and I guess, depersonalization, like as it was like going out of my body as it was happening, and it just confusing because it's pleasurable too. I'd never been, oh, this is what this does this. So all of that confusion and secrecy was there. It wasn't like I suddenly like came out of it at 35, like, oh, this happened. But I never really, with drugs, sometimes I had conversations with people when I was using, particularly like doing acid, where we get all real and talk about. But people don't like, let's talk about our trauma at the crack house. It doesn't really, the topics don't come up. Like, what brought us to the shooting gallery? Some guys like, it never really comes into the vernacular of using.
Yeah, I always shares like whenever I never bought dope and was like, gave a hug afterwards.
Exactly, totally. Thanks, I love you, bro. Unless they fronted you something. And you suddenly your new best friend. It's like, oh.
It's the best drug dealer ever.
Brother. Yeah. I love you, Bobo. Whatever. Yeah, Roach.
Roach. Yeah. Did you have a drug dealer named Roach?
I feel like if you don't have I still have a friend named Hog. If you have a friend named after an animal, I'm very suspicious of you. He's one friend. You know what I mean? Sums up with you. Yeah. You haven't explored life enough,
Yeah. So you come from this healthy upbringing for the most part.
Oh, absolutely. Older brother, so I love like crazy. He's 4 years older. Yeah.
How did what age did you start using? Let's
9.
start there.
I can remember. Yeah, my brother was 13. I was like, if my brother, my dad was like a star athlete, and then he tried to get us into sports. Like I'm very proud of this. There was a high school in Louisville. His name's literally in the wall, like class of 1960. I mean, he played everything. He was the first guy in his family to ever go to college. He got a baseball scholarship, like to IU. But he had these two sons, and we were about as athletic as like gravel. We did not like. We both wore glasses. We were both like 6'4" in our teens, and he thought. Well, I think by our teens he gave up. But so he was really, into athleticism and sports. But yeah, I mean, if my brother had been into like Michael Jordan, I might have been playing ball. But we were into rock, dude. I remember. I mean, I was born in 1972. I remember hearing. I'm so old, like when Led Zeppelin had a new song on the radio. You know what I mean? The 70s, and remembering when their drummer died from addiction, like on the, John Bonham's dead. Blah, blah, blah. So my brother was into rock and good rock, man, like Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult and punk rock, the Germs, it was like the era of mixtapes. But they were going to, he and his friends, he was 13, we were going to smoke hash. And we went behind this. I lived in Neptune Beach. We went by this. I can still see it, Brian. Like we went behind this house, and we had like the Charmin bong, the toilet paper roll, and we smoked it. And I can still see the shadow over the sand. It was at night, And I don't know if I got high, but I got in. I was in. I was with the kids, man. I was with the older kids, and this was the currency was using. So then later, I find out that's called approval seeking. Nothing to do with drugs. I just wanted to fit in somewhere and belong, So that was the first time but I'll say this, the first time I really used, it was profound. And I was 11. I'd grown up. I was up bigger. I was 11 years old. My mom was a crossing guard at a school. and I had I got sick. I had a gastritis or something. I had an intestinal infection. It was medical stuff. But they gave me paregoric. If you know this, it's like an old school opiate. It's like tincture of opium. So first time she ever left me home alone, I had to stay home. I was like vomiting and stuff. She gave me the paregoric and put it in the kitchen. And I remember it came on. I was like, this feels pretty good. It's supposed to quell so basically you don't crap yourself. It quells your stomach. She leaves. This was the pattern I did for. I went in the kitchen. There was probably literally like a skull and crossbones on that bottle. And you know what I mean? And I got this huge spoon and poured this big ladle of it, and I drank it, and I carefully washed out the spoon as for telling a future of wiping off spoons.
Yeah.
and you know what I felt? I felt complete. And I remember I listened to like Alice Cooper, Love It to Death, and Black Sabbath, Master of Reality. But I say that because I didn't realize I was incomplete. You know what I'm saying? Until I found completion. And it was a pattern that played out my whole active addiction. It was like, and it happens, I've been clean again for like 6.5 years, but I'm still in passive addiction. There's stuff I do still, and to fix who I am. But it was like that high before the high, like I'm going to do this bad thing. I'm going to sneak in here and abuse this medicine. And then I use, and then it's completely unfulfilling. It doesn't work. And then I feel like a piece of shit and all this shame. You did it again. What's going to fix that guilt? The high before, it's a loop. So that's when I really got high. And I think I am genetically predisposed to opiates. I'm not really, I've read enough on the science of this stuff, but it's interesting. So that's when when we say used and that's when
intentionally used. Intentionally
used. And then the byproduct was I felt it's that thing. I was like, this is what I guess normal is. And then of course wanting to feel good all the time, which is not how this life is designed, to feel good all the time.
I asked you for my own personal reasons. And I would give a backstory. Is when I was younger, I remember thinking that I had all these. I couldn't stop thinking. I mean, you're supposed to be thinking, right? But like the racing thoughts I had a lot when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my aunt, because my aunt who raised me is like, I just wish they had a medication that would like make me not feel this way. And when I found drugs, that was the thing that did it, where I wouldn't say that like, oh, I felt whole personally, but I felt, or complete, but I felt like, man, I'm not caught up in this. Like, I couldn't describe it when I was little, but like the obsessive thoughts and stuff like that.
Can I ask now, have you been, because I definitely, I guess I want to do this too, as much, not like I'm special, but because mental health is such a part of my story, and addiction. I got a double scratch off ticket or whatever, like drug addict, bipolar. Have you been diagnosed as an adult? Anything, you know what I mean, like upset or intrusive thoughts? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You don't mind?
No, not at all. When I was early in my recovery, I'm talking early. Homeless shelter days, right?
Right.
They give you all this. They give you all this free stuff, and I went down there, and of course they gave me the whole, spew of like, you're this, and this. And not to discredit it.
I know what they're doing. They're going by, it's their job, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the DSMV.
Right, whatever. Right? I forget. Yeah. The big red book.
I don't think there's a feeling, thought, or action that you can describe that you don't fall under a category personally. Yeah. But they gave me medication. I remember one. It was the Seroquel that they put me on. And when I took that, the first time I took it, I thought I was just gonna go. I took my medications, my mental health medications. And I went out, and boy, did. 30 minutes later, I was like, like I was so tired, and I was supposed to take that in the morning, and I was supposed to take, and I was like, man, I don't want to do this, and but what I found in my personal process is that when you're coming off of drugs and you're living in a homeless shelter, like your thoughts are going to be like this, a roller coaster of thoughts. Yeah. So I said I'm gonna give myself some time.
I understand.
And now I'm not, I'm not nearly like, especially if I'm staying centered, I'm staying involved, going to meetings, I'm doing things. I still find myself really needing to be busy.
Sure.
Like,
I have that. But I had that in a good and bad way where I think at one point, like when I was in clean, I was like a workaholic. I was like, I never saw this coming. You know what I mean? Like I thought, but the mental illness thing, it's like, I guess this is actually, we're in chronological order about this. So, but I can talk about this. So, I mean, it's funny with medication. I've taken like, I think 30, since 1985, I've taken like 32 different psych meds, 2 suicide attempts. See, formal suicide, because active addiction is a daily suicide attempt, ultimately, and mental hospitals, blah, 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 blah. But it's funny now, because even I've noticed the names of the medicines are gentler. Like when I was a kid, it was like, Thorstelazine, and now it's like Latuda. Even it's a gentler. So I'll get, this is a big part of my life. When I was 13, like I did, I mentioned I did really well in school. I mean, I was a big nerd, not a shocker. Like I went to school at the beach, and I was like all gifted classes, but I had like I was tall, not athletic. I had glasses, those big like tortoise shell looking glasses you see like an old photograph. I had long hair, and I'd wear like Iron Maiden shirts. You know what I mean? I remember like when I was 11, I saw Iron Maiden with my brother at the old Coliseum. Incredible show, by the way. It was like the Peace of Mind tour. So I was into metal and all this stuff, and I was like a nerd. I was really good at school. But I remember
he was like a Jeffrey Dahmer in the making.
I know, a little Dahmer. Yeah. I know, it's unfortunate. Yeah, day ain't over yet. Yeah, no, I've never really. It's like I'm not like I would air it on the mic. I'd never really. I remember being bullied, and I was like, "Why is this happening?" I didn't know. Just getting singled out, or a kid would like hit me, and I'm like, why did he I didn't get, I was kind of like a little flower child. I really, and I just wanted to like eat Doritos and hang out with my hamster Merlin. You know what I mean? So I was already ostracized, but I remember I couldn't sleep. I mean, I can remember I'm 13 years old. I'm in school. I remember the first night I stayed up all night. Like I'd never done that, because I was like intrusive thoughts. I was just like worrying, nervous, and I remember looking over to my left and seeing that the sun was coming up, and I was like, what the hell, man? I stayed up all night. So I was manic, and I remember I'd be so terrified that my parents, I'd go in their room and I'd put this little pallet like blanket on the floor, pardon me, because to be in there, I wouldn't even tell them I was in there. I just was like in such like existential terror. And I got really into the Beatles' White Album, if you know the record, but it's like the double white, just obsessed with it. And it came with, I still have my copy, like a double LP.
It's like one of the most famous albums of all time.
Yeah. And it's like, and so I had a poster, and it's an amazing record, even if you're not a 13-year-old bipolar. I give it high marks. But I had these 4 pictures of the Beatles, and I was already kind of smoking weed then. I was kind of like, I'd smoke it with my brothers. We'd go see like Rocky Horror Picture Show. We'd smoke weed. You know what I mean? Like 80s style, baby. And I was obsessed with it. I thought there was some message in the White Album. And there is, but it's not like stay up for 4 days and listen to the White Album. So I was clean as a whistle. I wasn't using. And I don't know if I might have said to my parents, like, I think I need to see somebody. I quit going to school. I was getting really nervous and getting sick, like making myself sick. My mom worked at the dean's. She was the dean's secretary. I remember I got in one fight at school with this kid. And it was like the big fight that day or whatever. And who's the first person I see? My mom, But I went to see a psychologist, and they took me out of school. Like I'm an 8th grade. It's weird because I can minimize myself even now, but I'm an 8th grade dropout. I tried to go to college and, but my education ended it when I was 13, but I'll say 2 things happened then. I mean, every kid thinks they're different. It's just, you can't, every teenager, there's the exception, like the psycho kid who's like, I'm the king of the pride, but most kids think it's just part of the deal. But 2 things happened. Like I had adults saying to me, like, there's something wrong with you. Like educated doctors with clipboards and lab coats. There's something wrong with you. And then I started being prescribed medication. And then it took me years to see this. If you take something, you'll feel better. So I took that as if I take tofranil and stelazine and then let LSD and those 2 drugs fight it out in my head, Do you know what I mean? So it was just madness. And I say this too, like, it's weird because I wish I could say Big Pharma was wrong. Like, I'm a textbook bipolar. Like, I've always been into art, always been creative, always prone to moodiness and just erratic, and just, I'm more prone to depression. I've been bipolar so long. They still said manic depression, which is one of my favorite Hendrix songs. It's my ringtone. It's manic depression. I wake up every day to the song manic depression. I wish I could say Big Pharma was wrong. And now I'm bipolar too. They've actually added all these subcategories, but they were right on the money. But it's interesting being an addict. I remember when I first got clean, people would say, like, I'd tell people I got clean. They're like, well, great, let's smoke a joint. You know what I mean? Like, all my friends at the time weren't in. Let's go to the bar. And it's interesting that they'll challenge it. You know, I don't know if you went through this. People will challenge that you were announcing, I'm a drug addict. They're like, no, you're not, Brian, man. You do powder. Just don't smoke rock. You know,
just
that kind
one.
of,
just have a beer.
Dude. They don't get it. It's the same in my direct experience. The same thing with mental illness. Like, if someone had cancer, God forbid, I wouldn't be like, oh, I feel that way. Do you know what I mean? I mean, like, it's not even like an exclusive club, but people will challenge mental illness, and I can be as intolerant. I've benefited also from I don't now, but I used to go to these depression support groups, and I meet people who were like paranoid schizophrenic, and I'd be like, whoa, like, even I would distance myself from someone else's illness. So it's been kind of fascinating, you know, to be mentally ill, and I think it's better. I mean, as far as the people's acceptance of it, but it's such a I'll say this, I have as much acceptance of being a drug addict and a addict as I'll ever have. I'm this year I'll get my 38-year medallion key tag of being mentally ill. I'm only now digging into accepting that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that it's a long-winded. I know I have long answers, dude.
No, that's perfect.
I know.
Yeah, it's funny when I was saying it wasn't like it was just my experience.
No, I don't take it. No, you're right. I'm agree with what you're saying fully.
Yeah, but my mental illness does run in my family. My aunt is, I don't know what is it, bipolar.
Something's
the one where you had
right.
No, it's apparent, and it made me think of what you said. As far as like the stigmatization
Absolutely,
with it.
Yeah.
She's the one where, you know, she has auditorial hallucinations from being manic for
staying awake and
and it is. So I think the stigma, like people being more accepting of it,
right?
When you have something that's like, at least they can semi-function, they're aware enough to function,
to know,
as opposed to somebody like my aunt who is, you know, not well functioning,
right?
You know, due to her mental illness.
I know people will knock, and I mean, I get it, like psychiatry or religion, and it's like every day I get up, I take my bipolar medication, and then I do either a Hindu or Buddhist meditation. So, you know what I mean? It's like, that's part of, when I first got clean, I had these, I mean, on the page, resentments towards psychiatry and religion. It's like, they both help me, but there's the things I've learned in recovery, the same principles, like willingness, being humble. I mean, I've taken medication clean where I'm like, this is like, I was never really into uppers, and I was prescribed, and my psychiatrist, who I've had the same meditation bench for 15 years and the same psychiatrist for 10 years. So there you go. And I haven't had the same group of recovery friends. And you know what I mean? There's a message from God, but I've been very transparent with her. But I remember I took something like Adderall, and I was like, this is too good. I mean, I got it. Why people are like, you know, it was just, and I quit taking it.
Yeah.
I got rid of it. I knew. So self-honesty. So the things I've learned in the recovery process, I've brought into the life process. You know?
Yeah, I took that when I was I took somebody else's when I was a kid in school, because I was using in middle school, and how
could you not?
Yeah, right. And it done the opposite. It made me incredibly, like, you know, like, ooh, I feel good.
Yeah.
It didn't make me, like, I've seen people on that
Maybe
stuff.
You didn't take enough.
Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't.
Day ain't over yet. Yeah.
But somebody said, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. It was something in that category of medications.
Right. Well, the brain reacts. Like, I've never puked from shooting heroin. I puked when I didn't have it. Like, people will get sick, and which is weird. I've taken I've taken pain medication in recovery, and it's like, I don't like the feeling of it. It's all side effects, which I think is God. It's weird. Like, I don't even like this feeling. And it's like, I chase this for much of my life, this high, so.
Well, I didn't like it the first time I used it either.
And is that right? Yeah, I never had even when I first did, I shot Dilaudid when I was like 17, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was alone. I mean, some of the idiocy of youth. And I didn't know, I was trying to not mainline. I was just going to inject myself. And I mainlined. And it was like that experience of being 11 just got even more delicious and vast. And you know what I mean? And here I am on a recovery podcast.
Yeah.
So that was I started pretty young. I felt the experience of addiction young. And then the mental illness thing. I think that's what I carried that through my whole life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
When it comes down to you mentioned about you mentioned a lot, obviously you're talking about the disease of addiction.
Right.
And that is like the number one trolling comment that I get on, especially on I put clips up on TikTok. And it's not a disease.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even respond because I'm like,
well, I feel like it might be disputed by some of the medical, who knows? I think it's a disease. It's also a disease that we have the power, pray for power at some point in this experience, to keep it out of its most extreme form, which is using. But I feel like, I think the World Health Organization views it as a disease, but I think it's not a disease with an excuse, because I've done that. Like, as I'm eating the 15th donut, like, well, I'm in the disease.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think primarily it's just people trolling. But there are people that, believe that without the experience of being a drug addict, I guess. It's one of those things that I never found myself. Nobody ever, they say it all the time. You're not when people are going around in elementary school and they're like, I want to be a fireman.
Exactly. I want to be a crackhead.
Yeah, I want to be a crackhead.
What did you want to be? What was the first thing you wanted to be when you were a kid? Can you remember?
Me?
Yeah. Like your dream gig. If it was like Superman.
Yeah, I wanted to fly.
Dealer.
I wanted to fly. I wanted to be able to fly.
Yeah, that was it?
Yeah.
Flight. Yeah.
Flight.
Yeah.
I don't really remember having one of those things of I want to be
something.
I didn't have many role models growing up.
Is that right?
That was
not
something.
Even,
know.
Mine were like Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, pictures like Keith Richards, and that was my role models. Remember when I was a kid, literally so young where you're still swinging your legs on the lunch table at school, and
I still swing my leg. I'm 5'4".
If I have a high enough chair at 6'4", I remember this kid came to school. This was 1981, and he was like, Jimi Hendrix put 1,000 hits of acid in his headband at Woodstock, and I was like, first I was like, what's acid? And I remember just thinking it melted his brain. And but I was like, I kind of want to do that. I've seen Woodstock, So yeah, I know but I view it as a disease, and I think I don't believe recovery is the only way. I think people do it's the only way for me. People work 12 apostle program, or they have a kid. I remember somebody I knew, they quit using because a gun suddenly was produced in the scene. I'm like, only one? But you know what I'm like? So I have got to get in the recovery process. So I do believe it's ultimately a spiritual solution, but I have enough skepticism. I'm really into the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu. It's the Krishna, Krishna the blue people, Hare Krishna. I'm really into that book. And there's a whole society of Hare Krishna people. They chant, and I've chanted before, but I've never really have joined a lot of religious, even though I'm kind of religious. People say spiritual. I'm kind of religious, truthfully. If I read all these different Hindu, mystical, Christian, I read all this stuff. That's my life. That's my passion and purpose. But I do believe it's a spiritual solution. But that also, I remember once somebody said to me, they said, between the spiritual and the animal is the human, and that's where we operate. So saying all that, it's I also go to the psychiatrist. I try to walk. You know what I mean? I don't just sit around and heal my heal my addiction. Like there's things I have to do.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between the unaware, because I grew up using. I was unaware that anything was going on. Yeah. Once you have the awareness, then if you're going back, I think it's more of an excuse. But under the definition of a disease, it says disorder,
the pathology.
Disorder. It's a disease or disorder of whatever. But I believe that I think less people would have something to say if it said the disorder of addiction.
Well, I do think that there's definitely people could self-medicate. I've never had, and I've had plenty of psychologists, psychiatrists, even in recovery. Pardon me. I've never had someone dispute that they look at it as a disease. That's because of people in recovery who can dispute or judge mental illness. Addiction is considered a mental illness, so they view it. And I'm like, that's good enough for me. It's almost like just pick a team. It's kind of like Christianity. There's like 8 billion denominations of this one story. You know what I mean? It's like just pick one.
Yeah,
try to be better. Yeah, be less of an asshole. Whatever it is.
But so I don't want to go too far. We're going down the rabbit hole.
I don't care. I'm probably being too philosophical. I'll talk about the past. I'm all good with that.
Yeah, that's what. So you started using when you were 11. You started intentionally using.
Yeah, and by 14, I'm off with the races. I'll share this. I remember, like, I was 14 years old. I was out of school. All my friends were older. I'm hanging out in Mayport, and when Mayport was Mayport back in the 80s, bro. Like, Atlantic Beach was rough,
Really?
Oh, yeah, it was bad. Like, off-base housing. I had no one in the military. I'm hanging out because that's where we go. And all my friends suddenly, like, I had to when I first got clean, I was writing, and I was like, oh, I think I was in a gang. Like, my first spot, I had to get tattoos, had to fight, and I was a coward. But I had, we'd have these, like, race wars. It was really weird. We'd have these, like, almost race wars over there. All the white kids, no guns, just going at it. And I'd like sit in the car and be reading as dudes are like flying across the hood of the car. And then the next day we'd be getting high with these dudes. It was such a weird. So I'm hanging out with older kids. I mean, like 20. I'm 14, hanging out with adults. And I remember I'd walk at night, like in Jack's Beach, and I'd walk down to the ocean. And I remember looking around. Like, this to me is addiction. I would be like 4 a.m. And I want to give you a visual. I would wear, like dashikis, the African. I discovered like Ornette Coleman and like jazz. I wanted to be like a black jazz musician. And I had like beads and long hair and sand. It's amazing I didn't get my ass kicked every night. But I'd walk down to the beach, and I remember looking around, and everyone's asleep, and there'd be like one lamp on in a house, and I'd be like, are they awake? Because they are as completely like baffled and perplexed by life. You know what I mean? That, to me, that was addiction. Like, I just always feeling alone, So yeah, I'll tell you what saved me. I went punker. There was a club. This is key to me. There was a club at the beach called Einstein A Go-Go. It was an all ages. They say punk, but it had a lot of bands, and it was all kids. They didn't sell booze, and a lot of people were using, and it was like the gothic girls and. You know what I mean? It looked like the Corpse Bride, and then, kids with mohawks and all this kind of stuff. And I saw all these bands there, man. Like, because I'd seen a lot of rock bands with my brother, mostly metal, like AC/DC, and saw some killer shows in the early 80s and downtown at like the old Coliseum or whatever. And we were metal dudes. And, but I would see like the Meat Puppets, and they were like and they're there. Like, they're attainable. Like, these guys would like walk by you and get on this little stage. And that place really saved my life, because it's what I found later in recovery and spiritual scenes, which is I found community. You know what I mean? All these other kids. I knew kids then. I had a friend, I think named Chris. And back then he was like, I'm a girl. We're like, okay. He had long hair. He dressed like a girl. We were like, Chris is a girl.
Yeah.
He's one of the person, he told me, he was like, Dan, he's like, you're the most pathetically straight boy I've ever known. He's like, you're definitely not gay. Like, you're pathetically straight. But I eventually started working there. Like, I don't know why they hired me. I knew the family, the Faircloths. They had a record shop at the beach. This is like old school Jack's Beach stuff. I sound like it's like, you could put the newsreel footage. But they hired me. So I would go there and I worked. So I remember like, I'd carry like Soundgarden, I don't think I worked Sonic Youth, but like Mike Watt, like Jane's Addiction, all these bands played there. and I would like hang out with them. I would help them load in. I'd be mopping the floor, and I'd be like talk to them, and I'd see how they designed the van to tour, you know. So it was a huge deal for me to have that purpose, like passion and purpose. It was like I got into records and you know, like I guess they call it underground rock. It became grunge. Like when those bands, I saw. It's funny. I saw Nirvana there with like 30 people. I've met like 1,000 people who were at this Nirvana show. There was about 30 people there, like in '89 or '90. And they weren't even that good, you know. So it's right before all these bands got huge. I was right in the middle. If you see '80s footage of kids like slam, we didn't call it moshing. It was like a slam dance. That's where I was at. That's where I found like solace and hope, was in what they call the punk scene, because it was like
Wallflowers, Misfits.
Misfits, every. I mean, it wasn't like a utopia, but it was like, you know, black kids, white, every ethnic thing, and kids with like crazy hair, and it was like this tribe. So I'll fast forward. I started playing music when I was a kid. I kind of omitted that for it. So when I was 13, I started playing in bars. I played bass guitar. I started playing in bars. I guess my parents at that point were like, "This kid is bipolar. He's doomed." So they let me play.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I've never been arrested. Have you been arrested?
Yes.
How many times? Bring it.
Quite a few.
Yeah,
as an adolescent.
Dude, I've never, knock on wood, I've never had a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
You know, but because I remember my dad, he would say to me, my dad walked a straight line, man. I mean, his family aren't like pirates, but there's some criminals. They're not, there's guys people in my family that are in prison that should be in prison. They're not, you know, but he would say to me, like, you better hope the cops get you first, which I knew what he was saying. Like, my dad was not violent, but if I got arrested when I was a kid, it might have leveled up the dynamic. But anyway, they let me play music. So I was always playing in these bands, and when I was 19, there was a band called the Gibson Brothers. They're this wild kind of like punk bluesy. They did old blues stuff, and I had their records. They were from like Ohio, and I called one of the guys that moved to Memphis, and I was like drunk, and I called him. I said, "Hey, I'm going to be in your band." I literally called like information on the like 411 Memphis directory. His name's Jeff Evans. He's a huge influence on me, actually. He's probably my first sponsor guru. And I was 19, he was 35, and the band had broken up. He's like, "But I'm going to start this new band." And like in 1992, when I was 20, I took the bus to Memphis, and I'm in the studio with this guy. So I played music from the age of 20 to 31, and I toured. Like the first tour I did was 68 Comeback. Like we did a Sub Pop single. At the time, Sub Pop was the shit. And we were on Sub Pop and this cool label In the Red, like all these cool underground labels. And at the time, 7 inches had come back as the currency, like 45. So, but I did this tour, man. Like,
what's that?
Like a 45 record, you know, like a small, you know. Like,
okay,
yeah. 45, 7 inch. And we did this tour. We had a 74 Cadillac hearse to tour in. And I would like take the bus from Jacksonville to Memphis, and it was like a 17-hour ride, man. And we'd stop in Mississippi, and just amazing. You stop at every little town. The closer you get to Memphis, you get every little town, you know, in there. And if I was lucky, I'd have like a bottle like hydrocodone, what they call lean, you know, pure lean. I have a bottle like hydrocodone. I could just be in the bus and just drink that and have my Walkman like blasting like acid rock. But I did this tour. We had a Cadillac hearse, and I toured for 2 months all over America. And man, I came back at least half a man. I was changed. I mean, half the guys, I'd never been, you know, we played like CBGB's in New York. We played all these places, all these cities. And we played almost every day for 2 months. Half the band were complete heroin addicts. So I'm seeing these dudes like in Dubuque, Iowa, trying to cop, you know, just madness, you know. And it was like, you know, and I would chip, you know, I would do like a little bit of dope. And I remember like we played in Detroit, and this guy in the band, Jack, who sadly died. He died from addiction. He was like immediately, he leaves the club and he cops. And it was like, whatever you do, don't go to that building over there and ask for, you know what I mean? It was like teaching me by default. And so in my early 20s, I played in this band called Royal Trucks, and they had signed to Virgin Records, played bass. And so then I started being around people in recovery. I heard of recovery from musicians. That's how I heard the message, you know. And I think I told you before, like as an aside, when I grew up at the beach, I lived like right by one of the biggest recovery clubhouses in Jacksonville. And I'd be like, look at those. They'd have like Ferris wheels and they're having a ball. And I'm like 18 years old on my parents' porch, like trying to smoke a joint with the light. You know what I mean? Just like it was. So I literally saw this thing that was kind of attractive because they're having a good time. I'm alone, you know. So I did that, man. I toured all over the States, and I played like 12 countries in Europe. And I'd never been on first time I was on a plane, I flew from Dulles and DC to De Gaulle and Paris. I'd never been on a plane. So my first, you know, I was like, it afforded me an opportunity to see the world, and in hindsight, it was kind of a sustained geographic cure because you're always moving, you know. But and we did okay, man. We played some good shows, like Royal Trucks played some good shows, and they did 2 records on. I was on the 2 records on Virgin, and then we got dropped, and then continued to. But Brian, I'd be like, I remember we'd stay at this decent hotel in London, and I would just be alone. I remember like I played a show there. It was huge, a couple thousand. We opened for this band, Teenage Fan Club, and it was a couple thousand people. This place, Shepherd's Bush, and you know, I came back to the hotel alone. I'm 22, 23, and I had a nominal girlfriend back home, but I'm alone, and I'm just like eating codeine and drinking. And I can remember looking like I'd leave the bathroom door open. I'm sitting in total darkness, using, like, what the fuck, man? Yeah. Like there was nothing, you know, and like nothing could fill it, you know, and music was the last thing addiction took from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it sounds, based on what you said, you know what you wanted to be when you grew up. You're kind of like chasing your dream.
I really did. I kind of look at myself with humble pride because I was such a fuck up, man. I just was, you know what I mean? I quit. I was never fired. I worked a series of menial, like house painting and restaurant. I quit every job until I got clean. No, the way I did quit one, I think, actually. It was just a nightmare, like working at a website place. But and then by the time I was 31, and I'd be on and off psych meds, but I'm using. I'd take my Paxil with like a Budweiser. Yeah. You know, I didn't take any of it seriously. So when I was 31, I remember like someone had said to me in recovery, they said addiction doesn't take all your dreams, just the ones that matter. That's what happened to me. Like, I remember I was playing in New York, and I had a really good friend, this guy, Tim Barnes, who's an amazing drummer, and he was getting all these great gigs. He's playing, like, in New York and Lower East Side, and he was like, come up here. It was like improv music, like really experimental stuff. And I was like, dude, I can't do it, like, because I'm strung out. Like, I couldn't, you know what I mean? I could barely leave, like, the beach, you know? Like, I was governed by pharmacies, or what, you know what I mean? I literally had another opportunity to play with a band in Europe, and I was like, I'm going to need at least 100 milligrams of methadone a day. And she was like, we'll get that. I'm like, no, you won't. Like, you're going to be touring up on the rider, methadone. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like a deli tray. So then from 31 to 35 I just ground down, you know, with addiction. I was part of I was a frontline soldier of the opioid crisis because I fell into that thing. I remember I first had what we call, like, I was chipping when I was 22 or 23. I was in Royal Trucks, and I was secretly doing heroin. Just a little, you know, wink. But I remember I got sick. I had the flu. I was like, I got the flu. And I used again, and then the flu went away. And you know what I thought? Strong game. Like, I was officially a junkie, like, really. I was like, well, this is okay. But then it spooked me. I got hurt when I was 25, fell through an attic. They gave me like Demerol. I didn't want to take it because I was already spooked about, and had been like copping. It was like inner city. It's bad, dude. I remember I copped once in an unnamed city, and this guy had just gotten out of prison. Like prison with a capital P. And he thought I was a cop. I'm pretty sure I had long hair and a beard. He thought I was like Vice. I'm a big guy. Yeah. I was kind of fit. I wasn't, at the time. And I was wearing a parka. And I'm like, what is this dude? I mean, I was in a neighborhood that he shouldn't have been there. That's how bad the neighborhood was. But anyway, I realized he thought I was a cop, and I opened my parka. So it was just why. I never thought, it's that thing when you're using, and I can't say that I'm not Billy Badass at all. I mean, I was terrified. I was like, I may not walk out of this scene. And like I said earlier, some people, they had that experience once and they're out. But I got into the whole doctor thing of all these like Oxycontin, morphine, all that stuff, and in mass quantities. And I don't, again, I mean, at the time, for whatever, now with like the Sackler family and the lawsuits and all that, I think doctors were just going, most of the doctors were doing, they were trying to keep me out of pain. And I parlayed like an injury into like I would have the MRIs in my truck, in my pickup truck. Here's my documentation. And I just got spun out. And I can remember, as far as getting in the dark and gritty, like I dislocated my shoulder. And a couple of times, if times were bad enough, I couldn't get anything, I would knock my shoulder out of joint.
Wow.
To go to the ER. Like, you got to help me now. Because, I'd go to these emergency, I had long hair and a beard. And they, I mean, I looked like a druggie. I didn't even try to present like I wasn't like this dope fiend. I'd go to the ER and they'd be like, okay, here's your 8 Vicodin.
Yeah.
It just, you know what I mean? But so that's what broke me. It was the opiates thing. You know what I mean? That was the checkered flag of the whole deal. So from 31 to 35, man, I was just sad looking back at that guy. Like everything went under the bed. You know what I mean? Bass guitars. I think getting clean is so terrifying because, drugs are, it's almost like there's a very small, with life, there's the sun, right? Everything's eliminated. And as you're using it, it gets so small. People, places, and things. And it was just like there was a tiny, it's like imagining one tiny pencil-thin beam of light on a table, and there's the drugs. Like that was my life. I was so narrowed, and near the end, I would use, man, I'm someone, I don't even like giving blood. When I give blood, what is the syndrome? It's like vagal, people faint.
Oh, yeah.
I do that. Yeah. I'll tell them, I'm like, I'm going to go out. It's amazing if I don't. So that's me. That's my true self. I don't like needles. When I use, I am all about needles. And it's I talked about community. It's ritual. It's ritual. That's why I like recovery. I need ritual. I need ritual. I mean, all the stuff with using all the implements are out there, whatever the drugs are, that high before the high shit. But I would use, and I couldn't breathe, man. I would shoot up and I'd be like literally, I was getting like cysts, and I had like prostatitis. I mean, stuff that old men get, like prostate, because I wasn't pissing because I was so strung out. And I would use, man, and I remember near the end, I don't know if, like, I kind of believe in angels, but I don't really, in a vast definite, and I don't really believe in demons, but I'm like, I don't know about good and evil. I believe in empathy and spite because I can act on those. You know what I mean? I can, but I remember, man, I was using, and I'm like gasping for air, and I laid in my bed, and I'm in like, this windowless room I'm living in, literally no window. And I felt like there was a presence in that room, and I visualized it as this like solid black, like sea urchin quilled thing sitting there. And just, I was hallucinating. I could hear it almost like whispering, like, damn. I mean, I'd have to leave the light. I was insane, man. Completely insane. And then I got clean.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I look back and it's like, I don't know if I believe in, people talk about grace a lot, which is like unwarranted favor or whatever. But I look at that. I used to think like maybe there was divine intervention. Like, why are we sitting here? But it's like 1 million people have died, mostly from fentanyl in the past. You know what I mean? And people were always dying. When I first got clean, it was like Roxy's. Like when we came in, it was rock. That was, people were dying from that shit. Like we find ways to blank out. But I don't know if I believe in grace, man. But I still think like, why did I survive that? Because I've been using for at least 20 good years. I mean, 20 eager years. Never got like, I mean, people get, AIDS, all this stuff, ODs, prison, all that stuff. Like, why am I here? So yeah, it was like, that was the fork in the road, dude.
Yeah. You feel like it was a bad spirit or something that was
I don't know, man. I almost feel like what we call defects, like when they'll all be lifted at the point of my death. Like the beam of light.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. It could have been, the mind is tricky. It could have just been a projection. But even if it was a projection, it might have been my mind saying, like, you got to wave the white flag. You know? But I don't know. I mean, spiritual. I'm not into like the dark arts, but I'm definitely interested, intrigued in what people call the occult or mysticism. All these things of every tradition, they all have them, whether it's like Catholic or Hindu, and they talk about these archetypes that I feel like maybe there is an evil permeating the world. You know what I mean? That is spiritual, not religious. I don't know, but I know that it scared the shit out of me. And I've really forgot about it until talking about it now, but it scared the living shit out of me. And it was part of my shift, And I knew it was around. I've been around people who were in the program, and I knew there was like another way. I remember when I met someone in recovery in my 20s, and they told me they were clean. I was like, why? You know what I mean? Yeah. This shit's great.
The loser.
Then fast forward 13 years, like, oh, this is why. Because you think a demon's going to kill you while you're shooting up. Yeah. Spoiler alert. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember your first meeting?
Oh, God, yeah. This is where I'd be only delicate because I don't want to be like rep anything. But the first meeting was in a strip mall at the beach. It took me a week I found the meeting, and it took me another week to grind it out. And I was like, at the time I was taking a lot of like Vicodin, and I figured out how much could kill you. And I was taking, like, would kill your liver. And I was taking way more that amount. And during, like, the cold water extract, you crush them up, and all this dope fiends. You freeze them, and you make this goop. You burn off the Tylenol in the freezer, blah, blah, blah. But I was exhaling this flavor of like chemicals or something, and like I said, I was getting like cysts and abscesses, and I was having a physical reaction besides like being attacked by creatures from the abyss. Yeah. I was having a physical thing. So I found the meeting, and I went to my first meeting using. That's part of my message, like show up high. So I had to take whatever I had just to drive the mile literally to the meeting. And I go in there, Brian, and it's like, I sat down, and it's really bright, and I did not look like I knew when I was 19, I used to drink, and I would think like, I'm an alcoholic who loves drugs. There was always that callback. Yeah. And so I knew I went to this, I was like, I think I have the condition. I knew I was a drug addict, and proudly so. And I go in, I sit down, it's super bright, man. It's like fluorescent lighting, like flickering, and I'm like, oh man. And I sit next to this guy. He's a skinhead. I'm thinking, well, maybe this guy could be like a punk. Maybe he's not I don't know if he's like Aryan Resistance. Maybe he's a punk rock guy too. Like he's not some racist skinhead guy. And I sit next to him. This is my first, and I'm like, he's like, what's your drug of choice? And I tell him, and he goes, mine is violence. And then they start the meeting. Welcome. Blah, 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 blah. And I later knew this guy. And he was all right, But yeah, that night I got what we call a sponsor. I got a sponsor that night.
Your first night.
Not even didn't know. I got a sponsor high and not knowing what it was. And that guy, we were together for like a year, and he saved my ass, man. He saved my ass, and I got clean in the meetings. I've never been so sick. I remember on the third day, this woman who was where I was living in the house, she had this giant container. I turned her into a drug dealer. She had this Bugs Bunny sized container of Vicodin, and I'm kicking. And she's like, if you ever want some of these, rattle, rattle, rattle. She's in the house. And I was like, no. Like I'd had enough hope. Like we were saying earlier, it seems incomprehensible this stuff's going to work. But whatever it was, I was like, I'm going to ride it out. And man, I was sick. I was sick for a month. I lost, it's like kids. I don't know if you either try or don't try this. I would not say to people, I was just doing I would not say to someone, kick in the meetings, because I know there's alcohol, benzos, and I'm not a doctor, but I know that people can have seizures and die. But I got sick. I think I lost like 17 pounds in like 12 days. I was sick, man, and people just held me up. I'd run out of the meeting and go. I'd be like in some weird like church nursery room with like Jesus, like these. Yeah. I'd be like, I'd have to go vomit in the back. I was sick as a dog. So yeah, but the first guy I work with. He remember him saying to me, he was explaining there wasn't stuff like read this, look at this thing for a month. He was like, what we're doing here, this whole process is based on spirituality and spiritual principles. And he was like, and these are just actions. He laid it out. I'm smoking a cigarette in the parking lot after. He laid it out. He demystified the whole trip. And I'm indebted. Our relationship changed, I say magnanimously, but he really laid it out for me, like what I was to, and I did it. You know what I mean? And I do the same, even come back from there, I do the same thing I'd probably heard in the first 5 meetings. You know what I mean? Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
The same shit.
No magic there.
There's no magic. Well, I think there's magic, but we got to tap in. We have to do the abracadabras on us, you know. But I can be as judgmental as anybody. But people kind of balk. I'm like, this all still sounds pretty reasonable, man. People's willingness level is on them, but I'm like, this all sounds pretty reasonable.
Make meetings, get a sponsor.
Dude. And it's just like I had to stick around enough for the interest to accrue, like for it to pay off. But it's hard. I think that's the window of trying to help people. When my sponsor Tom C, passed last October, which I'm still I got new sponsors, but Tom used to say like the way you stay clean is you stay clean when it makes no sense to stay clean, and everybody's going to hit that wall. But I remember being new. And I was all in, like I was in the process, like as I was kicking. There was, I was pen to page, man. I was writing and that's I think is a hard time for people that we really need to, because it makes no sense, like keep going to these meetings and pray, all this stuff, and that's I think when it's hard, like undiagnosed shortcomings. When you're just like batshit crazy and full of coffee and cigarettes, So I think that's a time I try to really be. I don't do it well, but I try to be very tender with people in that time, man, because it's hard. Yeah, and there's a reason people don't get clean, because it's fucking painful. It's not like a big like. Why do people not stop? Because you do it your whole life, man. It's like people will say like it's all romance and finance. I don't. Dude, it's like I've dealt with identity loss. Like when I came in, nobody cared that I rolled a really good joint. Identity loss, mental health, physical health, grief. There's so many things I've dealt with that aren't tied to my like romantic life or my admittedly bad credit report. Yeah. So yeah, that was me being blasted into I don't know what it was. Higher power,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't remember what was said in my first meeting, but I remember feeling like I belonged a little bit. Yeah. And there was like, I felt hope.
Yeah, it's weird.
It was like just the lingo, I think, alone was like, and the hugs. Yeah. It was like, man, I felt like some of these people may have done some of the things that I've done. Right. Absolutely. Or felt some of the ways that I felt. Yeah. And if they could stay clean, maybe I can stay clean.
It's amazing how it's like, because when I came in, like I didn't, I think I talked earlier, even like maybe on the mic, like I never smoked crack. Although when I relapsed, I was using with this guy and he's smoking crack. I was like, that looks pretty good. And, but I was identifying with the drug, and it's that thing, like whatever it takes to stick around, and that had to fall away, man. It was the thing, like in Buddhism, they say the unfettered mind. All that stuff falls away. But yeah, hope. A friend of mine always says hope is the one principle you can give to somebody. You can put in them is hope, and it's just like as long as somebody's alive, there's hope. You know what I mean? But it's painful. I don't stay clean on the backs of the dead. I don't talk that. I'm way more like Ramakrishna, the Hindu mystic, than like Rambo. I don't attack people in the recovery environment. And I have had people ask me to help them, like sponsor them. And they're like, the more than once, the dudes, you talk about God meditation, but you're kind of an asshole. I'm like, I'm the asshole that's going to help you not die today. Dude. You know what I mean? So, but when we're together, nobody comes in on an upswing, dude. And no one comes in like, I'm thrilled I'm here. I've entered the Hall of Winners.
Yeah. Nobody comes in on a winning streak.
That's the thing. Nobody does. No one. It's just part of the deal, you know. So.
Well, you do go on, and I guess you got farther on in this process. Did you became a writer? Or you write?
That's a whole other. Yeah, I always wanted to write. I'll say this, like I went to this meditation retreat. You ever Vipassana meditation? It's mindfulness. Say it's like it's a form of Buddhist meditation. I did it for like 13 years, but I went to this retreat, man. It's almost like two weeks. and you take a vow of silence, and you're out in the woods, buddy. I mean, I was in the middle of Georgia. It's an amazing experience, actually. And,
I heard about the guy. Hang on, what's the name of this place?
It's a Dhammapada. Goenka is the method.
Is it kind of like a hippie-ish?
Oh, it's very hippie. But
the guy that was on that I was talking to you about, Parrish, that was on last week.
Was
I guess
he a Vipassana guy? Is he?
He went there for a while.
Yeah. It might be the same, but so it's basically. I mean, it's watching your body sensation and blah, blah, blah. But I did this, and it was just like I'd never been, and I'd done meditation and stuff. My whole point is, I went out there and I was just like, I took a vow of no kill. There's roaches everywhere, and I'm not going to kill a roach. I mean, they're literally on me. It's a nice enough place. I'd slept in worse places touring in indie rock bands.
Yeah.
But I'm out there, man. You know, I'm in my sleeping bag, and I'm like, God, why am I out here? And the answer was just, and it wasn't like this booming voice. It was like God, love, and art. Like that was my purpose. So I had like, let me not ruin your brand new mic. I had about 2.5 years clean. And a buddy of mine was leaving a local weekly. And at the time I got clean, I was a groundskeeper at a hospital. And it was like the greatest job in the world because I would get up at like 4 a.m., meditate, maybe go for a run, cut grass, be there from like 8 to 1:30 or something, come home, maybe exercise some more, go to a meeting, go to bed. Like it was amazing, man. You know what I mean? It was like what I needed. And keep in mind at the time, I remember like, I'm surprised at how humble I was because at one point I'm cutting grass and I was like, I was in Rolling Stone, like 1995, dude. You know what I mean? When you were 23, now you're 37. Be grateful. You know what I mean? It was humbling, but that went away pretty quickly, and because my life got better, I stuck around. So a friend of mine was leaving, longtime arts editor, and I thought I'd want to be a writer when I was younger, like a junkie, right? You know, because it sounded, I was always, like imagining the book release party with women or whatever, cool women, like hot, nerdy women or whatever.
Yeah.
And this ego. And he was like, you can do this. And I was like, I cannot do this. And I'd written one thing for them, the poet, like the Basketball Diaries. Like, the guy, Jim Carroll, his story. At Einstein A Go-Go, he had done a poetry reading when I was like 17. And my buddy Mike and I, Mike, we drove him to Tallahassee, and he died. And I wrote this story about my encounter with him, and they had published that, like the back page thing, like most have anyone can, like an op-ed piece, anyone can write in. So that had been published. So man, they hired me. Yeah, there's a woman who now does TV news. It's like she just took a chance on me. I had no education. I remember going into the office for the first time. I had an office, which was weird. I could close the door and open. And I had an Apple computer, and I was like, I didn't know how to turn the computer on. Yeah. And I was just like, okay, God, now what? And I was there twice. I was the arts editor, and I think I've done about 500 things. I mean, those aren't huge stories, but I did. My sponsor had written a memoir. I'll say this, and he was like, do you want to edit? This is when I was the groundskeeper. You want to edit my memoir? And I'm like, sure. I never have editing a ham sandwich, but I'm an addict. I can do that.
Yeah.
So we go on the process together, the recovery process. And when I'm editing his book, and when we get done with that round of this process, his book gets picked up for publication, and I get a job as an editor. Like, it's a word that was not even in my life till I was with Tom. And he was blown away. He had like almost 40 years. He was like, this is just wild.
Yeah.
People can, and I brought all the stuff I knew of like art and being into music, all these, like, I'm really into John Coltrane. So I could mention, all these things I was into, I could bring into the art thing. And it was like fake it till you make it. I'd ask people, there was 3 women at this paper who showed me how to write, because I didn't know grammar and stuff. I could read. I mean, if you read, but it was a total God shot. So yeah, whatever. I still do that 13 years later. I'm a freelancer now. I write for like a local music affiliate, and But yeah, I never. That's how I started writing. It was a God shot, dude, full on.
Yeah, that's super cool.
It's a hustle. No, I'm really. Yeah. It's still weird, and I've been working for myself since I was writing for a local surf magazine, and it folded during the pandemic. So I've been writing for myself, and employee theft remains at an all-time high as a freelance. I'm just bad with like figuring. It's a hustle, but it's a good hustle. And now I'm going to have the same job when I move to London here, which I'm very grateful for, so, but yeah.
No, anytime you can make money doing something you like to do, and like artistically express yourself, totally, is like
what brings you joy. I don't know. I keep getting sidetracked. I was saying, like, as far as these God things, and people will say spiritual, not religious. I understand that. Like, I do a kind of meditation. I did Vipassana. I do this meditation called Atma Vichara, which just means self-inquiry. It's a form of Hindu meditation, like Indian meditation. And I do that. When I was in London this last time, I went to like a Zen center with my wife. We went to a Christian meditation center. And I do my deal. And there's an energy field I know from meditating with people. I'm one of these people. I think if we all meditated, we'd have world peace. I'm that guy. I really believe that. I believe we'd have total harmony. I think the whole world the whole universe is in meditation, and we're not, But people talk about God like he's like Yosemite Sam. People, Sky Daddy. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know if I believe in a God. I don't know if my higher power is God. I kind of like this esoteric, like holy guardian angel, like there's just a being. Which I'm really, sometimes I just think, Harry Dean Stanton, the actor, the old crowd, I just think he's like Harry Dean Stanton or something. Like my higher power is like Walter Matthau. It's like, come on, kid. This tired old guy smoking a cigarette on the astral plane. But I know that the meditation thing and the spiritual practice has made me realize just in the past, this is like hot off the presses, folks. I would say I'm really spiritual and religious, like I was saying. Because all I read is about these kind of practices, and I do it. I have to generate some hope, and I believe like this. I think recovery is simple. I don't think spirituality is simple, but I really do believe that there is a force that's helping me. I honestly don't know if it's the same force that was with me. May the force be with you. Yeah. The same energy or spirit that was with me in 2007. I don't know. But I know there's times when I pray and it feels like, the universe. I don't know if you had this experience where it feels like the universe almost holds its breath. Like it gets really quiet. You know what I'm talking about? If you pray, I don't know if you pray but it feels like I'm really being listened to by something.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, there's something going on.
Yeah, no, I completely.
You know what I mean?
Maybe a little different. Mine is, I say this carefully because I don't want people to think I'm crazy. But I pray for things, and a lot of times I'll pray for somebody, and they appear. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like,
I do.
Simple stuff like that.
Yes. Conscious contact, some might call it.
Yeah.
It's evident.
Evidence,
and you're aware of it
completely.
I mean, the chain coincidences. This happened like last Friday. This is I love, man. When this happens in these mundane, like I'm at Walmart and have a realization. I was washing the dishes, and the comedian Natasha Lyonne. She's on was it a Russian Doll on Netflix? She's got a raspy voice, and she's a survivor. But anyway, there's a podcast that I listened to, and she was a guest. So earlier, I'm listening to this song by the 60s rock guy, Rocky Erickson. The song's called I Have Always Been Here Before. Not a well-known, but, he's kind of an obscure guy. And he's had a 60s rock band called the 13 Foot Elevators. But I love this guy's music. And it's this folk song about reincarnation, ultimately. I have always been here before, like just coming back. And he talks about like Stonehenge and Egypt. He's going through the circle of being. And I'm listening to this podcast. I just pick it. I like Natasha Lyonne. In the podcast, she says, like near the end, it's like that Rocky Erickson song, I have always been here before. But you know what I mean? At some point, if things are so on the nose, like don't wipe them away.
Yeah.
like there's something happening, like I remember when I first prayed after my first meeting, I went home and I threw everything away, even the good bong. I had this ornate glass, you know what I mean? Even the good, all my books were like, my whole goal at 35 years old, before I got clean, my goal, I'm going to move to Eastern Kentucky and grow my own opium. That's what I was like. Then I'll always have drugs. So what a goal.
Yeah.
Like I reduced my life. But I remember I went home and I prayed and I just said like, I made my brother take pictures of me throwing the stuff away to prove to myself I had thrown the stuff away. Like the Ziploc bag of bent up needles and all this shit. And I remember praying, man, and I said, whatever's out there, help me. Like I was like, I don't care what is out there. And man, I don't share about this a lot, but I mean, it's my story, but I heard a voice. And it wasn't like, behold.
Yeah.
It was a soothing, affirmative thought. And it just said, you can live your dreams. So I can articulate it. You can live your dreams or you will surely die in this nightmare. And then I was back to like, use just the stream of like the intrusive thoughts of wanting to get high, blah, 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 blah. And I'll never forget that. Like, because it is true. I don't know. And the thing is, I don't know what my dreams are, man. My dreams, like recovery, if nothing else, is about new memories, right? You know what I mean? It's new memories, people, places, things, new. But I'm 51 years old, knock on wood. And like, I've come to a place now where I think like, what if everything is okay? You know what I'm saying? What a novel. Like in my mind, the car never makes the corner. Do you know what I'm saying? It's always like Burt Reynolds goes off the cliff and then whatever and in the car. And it's like, what if I'm always going to make the turn? Like, what if everything is okay? Like, I have to tell myself that because, man, I can make myself, and I'm sure you can, just insane, man. I sometimes I feel like I'm like a self-haunting I'm haunted. The stuff I talk about, I mean, I'm still haunted.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even the abuse thing can come up, and the mental illness thing doesn't exactly make me feel like I'm doing cartwheels to the universe, but I can't separate any of it. Like, and integrity can be like being morally forthright or whatever. But, there's another definition of integrity where you're fully integrated with who you are, like at peace. And I think that's what we call serenity. And I got to do all this like mundane recovery stuff, and then it just pops off.
Yeah,
we have the thing. We have the spontaneous realization, So which I think is, if it's not God, it's a God or something. It's a higher power. I don't care what. And you hear that people say like they don't. I don't care. When Tom died, he was till the end. I mean, I think he had 50 years and he was like, I have no idea what it is. Something's going on, man. But he did all the stuff. He went to India. He was into Buddhism. He was into Hinduism and like mystical, he did the deal. So in conjunction with the recovery thing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd give a sermon or something.
No, yeah, you're good. I think that you mentioned something about like I think that there's a payoff with everything.
Yeah.
Like you being you're like incredibly, you seem to be pretty artistic, with the writing and music.
Demise, yeah.
But there's a payoff with everything. It's like balances out.
I agree.
Through the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of, when you were talking about like everything being okay, that it's kind of been like my philosophy, because it's just happened so many times and throughout my recovery process, is that things they always work out. May not always be the way that I want it or the best way, but things always work out.
Right.
So yeah, but I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, man. We're in hour 4. I'll talk.
Yeah. We're at an hour 40.
Oh yeah, man. No refunds. Yeah. Viewership. Yeah.
You were I really enjoyed having you on, man.
It's I really don't. I mean, it's a weird time in the world and with addict. But I think we hear not that I'm no obviously like junkie bass player. I'm no avatar of wellness. But it's just all we hear about is the horror of addiction, and it's in everyone's. What's happened in the last like 10 years? It's in everyone's face, and I'm getting a little political, but like people are in prison. Like we're not. People need to be. There's a great record by this band called the Art Ensemble Chicago. It's called People in Sorrow. People are in sorrow from this shit. And people need to know like there's a way out, and we do get we get every day is a crossroads, and we can get. So this is important to me.
Yeah.
To talk about this stuff, like
and it's not just the person; it like like the mothers.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
it seems hopeless. It seems, and you know, it's like that's the thing. People I know with mentally ill kids, I can say, man, I survived suicide. You know what I mean? Like we can get through.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but yeah, it's all a gift, man. We're in the bonus round now, brother.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We really are.
Yeah.
We really are.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Well, cheers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah.